Professor Rotella, in opening our conference, said that from his observatory he saw three groups of Europeans: enthusiastic, skeptics, and opponents. I guess that our conference gave elements for classifying countries, people, social classes, environments, religions in the three columns. The debate explained the diverse orientation in EU with respect to the institutions, which was one of the aim of the conference. As I said in my speech the day before yesterday, as a matter of fact, we may exercise any criticism towards the EU, but never in the long period of building up the institutions, European people expressed itself against the institutions. It was more or less approving what happened, but never less than half of population, let's say, expressed itself criticizing the union. Notwithstanding the crisis, the deep social and economic crisis coming to Europeans from USA. Don't forget that the two big crises of Europe we are experiencing comes both from USA. The first is economic, the derivatives, financial, which was translated from America to Europe, and the immigrants and refugees waves once again were provoked by American wars around Europe, and they come to Europe now. These were the two main critical issues in the last 20 years in Europe, or 15, 16 years, both provoked by Americans, and we paid the bill of that. But notwithstanding those two crises, which have been perceived heavily in Europe, if we look at the percentage, even recently calculated by Pew Center, they certify that even in UK, 49% of population looks with favor to you. The question was whether you are favorable or not to EU. And the highest favorable score is in Poland, 72%, which surprises me very much anyway. That comes in Greece, 37%. It's fully understandable. Then Spain, Germany, Netherlands, France, and Sweden all are between 60 and 70% of favor. Italy scores 58%. No country except Greece is under 50% unfavorable. This is a very important result because it comes in a period of crisis, not of success. It means that in EU, during the decades of existence, it has been generated a kind of sense of belonging. I am a European, so I may criticize, I may, underline what is wrong on my opinion, but I feel European. It's what happens at the national level. Every one of us is very critical vis-à-vis the government and others, but at the end of the day, this is my country. And we may say, this is my Europe. This is the general feeling in EU. Having said this, I am fully aware that the things in EU could go better. Many scholars, when look at the evolution of EU, says that it started in the wrong way. That the dream was good, but the way it started was wrong, and some effects we are paying. And the criticism is exercised, as usual, it has also been said here, Europe was born only economic. And it is only economy and finance, and people are not only economy and finance, they are many other things which EU cannot represent because it is not the other things. Jean Monnet is the recognized father, true father of the institution as we know, as we have it. And Jean Monnet, when he wrote his memories, he was near to that. He knew that he had a few to survive. He wrote he was very sincere, it doesn't happen often. He was very sincere, he said, I was wrong in making a union or generating communities, starting with economy. I had to start from culture. Culture, not politics, culture. And he said, but we had no other option because we tried to convince the government to start through other things and they refused. I told yesterday, intervening in a debate, that USA had to force, threatening to take back money of Marshall Plan, France above all, to deal with American money with others through a multilateral body which has to be created, which was the Organization of European Cooperation and Economy, today OECD. It is not by chance that it is located in Paris, because it was summiting as a kind of bargaining between Washington and Paris at the time. Okay, we accept, but it has to be in Paris. Otherwise, we take back the money we promised. Imagine. This was the nationalism, which always has been the problem of Europe, but I will be back on this. So Jean Monnet says, I would have, if I could do, again, this, I will start with culture. Well, imagine, in 2019, we still are not able to produce a common book of history in Europe. Poor Jean Monnet. How could you start from culture if we cannot even have a common book of Europe? Every country has its own history. Every country still celebrates the wars as winner of other brother or sister country in EU. What is totally crazy, you understand? Imagine if you celebrate the victory of the northern states in the United States against the southern Virginians, Confederate states. It would be total craziness. So these are the contradictions in EU. And every time we exercise our correct criticism vis-à-vis EU, I always say, are you criticizing the member states or the common institutions? This is the problem. We say Europe, what is Europe? Are we saying that the Commission did wrongly, that the Council did wrongly, that the Parliament, European Parliament did, or the member states, or some member states did wrong? That's the problem. As far as I may say, honestly, most of the criticism we attribute to Europe are for certain states, even my country, why not the institutions. And we always have to take care that EU and the member states are two different stories. Even inside the institutions, we have two different mechanisms. One is called intergovernmental cooperation, which we consider yes and not as EU. Intergovernment is traditional politics. And the other is supranational, which is reduced, unfortunately, more and more by the appetites of the states. This is the first matter I wish to raise to your attention at the end of our conference. So when, for instance, I recommend to you, if you go to Brussels, visit the Parlamentarium. It has been realized 3 years ago. It's something new, very well done, very well done. And there is the history of Europe with all the contradictions, and you will feel the need of having the institutions, and to save the institution, because you understand that without the EU, it would be nightmare in Europe because of the appetites of the states. Don't forget the last speech of François Mitterrand at the European Parliament. François Mitterrand was there with a cancer. He made a very, very short speech because he couldn't speak more than the time he did, and he was dying a few months later. I don't want to read that, but just some quotation. His speech, he spoke about the Second World War, he spoke about his experience. He said, I come from a country which is famous for being nationalist in Europe, and then he said, nationalism is war. And he said, if we are back, if we destroy that and we are back to old Europe, we will have again wars. This was the only things he said, the President Mitterrand. Now, and this is absolutely true. Inside EU, we had no war after 51, after the creation of the first European Community. At the borders of Europe, we have a lot of wars, even now between Ukraine and Russia, you know the situation. In Yugoslavia, you remember what happened. Cyprus was split in two by a war. Greece attacked Cyprus, was not a member of the Union at the time, etc., etc. Fascist regimes in Spain and Portugal and in Greece, then they entered the Union and democracy came out. How can we forget that? European Union is saving the peoples of Europe from the old Europe, let's call it this way, the old Europe, which can never be back. This is the first point, but I will not limit me to the story of peace, so God bless EU because we are in peace. It's not enough. But we have to remember that. Every country enters in EU, stop making wars and being aggressive with the others. Even Croatia was you know, what was the behavior of Croatia during the Yugoslavian war? Finish. Cyprus, finish. The Turks are living perfectly well. Greece, finish. No other attack. This is the history. It's not fantasy, it's history. Then there is another mechanism, which is economy, social, progress. As a matter of fact, Italy, we want to compare what was Italy before being a member of European Union. The reach of Italy starts with the first community. Immediately, the Italians going to Belgium to work in mines, and Italy received money, and then the remittances of immigration, and starts like this, the Italian, so-called Italian miracle of the 60s. Which makes Italy one of the most powerful economic countries in the world. Nationalism. Is nationalism blocking the European defense community? France Parliament, through the alliance between the Gaullist Party and the Communist Party, blocks the idea of having a common defense. No common defense. It was created a European political community. It was created, it was a treaty signed by the government. Once again, it was stopped by some nationalistic forces. The European Constitution, the treaties were ready, and some nations and governments stopped that. So every time, and you see what is happening in UK, poor United Kingdom, which is becoming a disunited kingdom. United Kingdom could be leading Europe together with France and Germany as only two possibilities if they really do what probably will happen to leave Europe. Either it will be islands at the end of Europe, lost at the periphery of Europe, or they will become the 51st star of United States in practice. Imagine you refuse to be leading Europe and you become a vassal of America. What can do UK in front of the power of America? Just say yes every day, nothing more. And even when you imagine the trade there are studies which I cannot now quote here, but all the calculations which have been done, the power which Britain could have in front of China, let's say, or United States, or even Europe, when it goes to search for its benefits. What is the power? The bargaining power of UK would be very, very small. Europe has bargaining power. And this benefit for all the member countries, of course. If we wish to use a kind of phrase which may resume the debate we had, we were analyzing a typical historical episode of cooperative regionalism. These are two important words. Mr. Intini called about United States of the world, and he said this is a dream. Aristide Briand had this dream, and Kant, with his small book, and others. This is really far. But for the time being, United States of America is the most interesting example. You may realize a regionalism. A regionalism means countries or people or states which unite themselves as Americans did in a region with contiguity situation for realizing peace and progress, let's say, synthesizing. This is what the Europeans are trying to do. And cooperative, because of course Soviet Union did the same, but it was not cooperative, it was an imposition from a big brother to the others. Instead, the cooperation could happen when you recognize the rights of the others and you treat more or less all on the same way. Cooperative regionalism is a scheme, is a political scheme, not only economic, it's a political scheme, a military scheme, and a security scheme, which needs time to be realized. But I have always said, don't forget that we are talking about a bottom-up process. And every one of us know how complicated our bottom-up process. America was an up-down process. You had a war and you united the country. In Europe, we don't want to have a war because it would be a nightmare for Europeans which have to avoid wars because they had too many wars already. So it's a bottom-up process which needs time and patience and which may fail. May fail. Why not? This is one of the possibilities. Our debate helped to understand the advantages and the risks which are included in this historical process of cooperative regionalism. We had some moments in our debate which I found very, very interesting. And I wish to recall some of them. Identity. Identity was an issue which came often to surface, even from those of you who introduced the matter of Christianity, Islam, etc. I said, and I don't want to repeat, but I mean, I just give you this idea once again. We always talk about identity, but we are composed of identities. It's the same happens with liberty. We say liberty, no, we have liberties. Some works, some no, some we may exercise, other we can't. We could never exercise all the liberties of humans. And identity is the same. We have many identities. And Europeans have more identities than many because they come all from a large, long history, and often the history of a country is not one history, many. Imagine Italy, more or less all of you are enough familiar with Italy. Imagine if you put together someone from Trentino Alto Adige, from Bosen province, and I pronounce in German because they are Germans or Austrians, and Sicilian coming from Arab or Norman, what they have in common? They have in common that someone, conqueror, decided one day that they had to belong to the same country. It's okay, no problem. It happens everywhere. But they have different identities and common identity. The common identity came from unity and from culture. Advance, I am aware that we had Italy even before the Unitarian state. Why not? But there are other identities. And if they became Americans because of their life, they have another added identity, which is not canceling the other. So we may have many identity. Why not? You could be Christian and you marry a Buddhist or an Islam, and you become a bit Buddhist you too. Why not? Because you start having dialogue. So the problem of identities, it's key matters, in my opinion, because in this global world, we have to be accustomed to forget about identity. All of us are damned to have many identities, and especially in Europe. Another thing which came was, of course, that one of Brexit, but I wouldn't be back on this. I said enough, even too much. We have to wait what the Brits decide, and then we can be back. It was interesting what Marcello and Armao said about region participation to the building up of Europe. Yeah, this is important, even though it's complicated to organize in institutional terms, because it's easy to give consultants to consult an institutional body. Different is to make it to decide. As far as I know, the only mechanism which works as in the United States is to have as the Senate. The states vote, the states decide. But no country in Europe is made up of a Senate or a chamber representing the territories, because in the processes of the states in Europe are up-down everywhere, with very few exceptions. Very few. Switzerland, but it's not in the European Union. Most of them are made by conquerors, by kingdoms, by emperors, up-down. And the territories are not represented in the key institutional deciding body, as it is the case in the States. In Italy, we tried many times to transform the Senate from the old kingdom, privileged people, as it was at the beginning, as the Chamber of Lords in Britain, in a body of the region, and never happened at the national level. Imagine how difficult it could be in Europe. But still, the matter is there, and it's very interesting. Another thing was lobbies and interest. It was Professor Racutiene who talked a lot about this. Lobbies are normal way of functioning of democracies. Democracies are a kind of input, output, and feedback functions. Inputs from society enters the political town, and then there is an answer, an output. Who is the one who transferred the input? The lobbyist. Of course, there is a honest lobby and non-honest lobby. There is a bribing. This is unfortunate. These are the things of life. But we cannot damn a function which is positive because there are unhonest people or bribers. This is matter of justice, but it's not matter of politics. Lobbies are in Washington, D.C., are in Brussels. If they work properly, they have a social function which has to be respected. We did a lot about the Central Eastern European countries, and we just heard a very interesting report before. I don't think I should be back on this. There is a question here which I wish to recall. Often EU asks itself, should we go deeper, this is the mantra, or should we go enlarging? Deeper means let's move to the federation, or try to enlarge the competencies of the common institutions. The other possibility was let's be generous with others. You know, when you are generous with others, it happens in our day-by-day life. Sometimes the other doesn't understand that you are generous. The interpretation is another one. You are weak, that's why you do that. There is some tricky question under your generosity, which I have to discover, etc., etc. It happens in politics, unfortunately. My opinion is that the countries of Eastern and Central Europe were not ready to enter the European Union. But I wrote at the time, and Prodi was president of the Commission, And I told him he had the head of cabinet of a British head of cabinet. He had a kind of agreement with Britain. Britons and America wish to use as Troy hordes the entering in the community of those countries. But it was bad for themselves, as we see. They were not ready. Everything in history has to mature before it. They were not ready. Then now is a problem of how integrating them in what we call acquis communautaire, which comes from, of course, the first day of the existence of the community. And it's a fatigue, and nobody can forecast how this story will end, but God save the Union, forget about other additional nightmare of entering from other countries. Please, they stop there, they prepare themselves, they learn themselves to the democratic system, to cooperative regionalism, to don't wave nationalism every day, and all the things that you cannot use if you accept the rules of a club where nations have to diminish and the community has to raise, as Father Alejandro said today, that the union has to promote what is common, not what separates one another. Question of migration. Well, it is linked to identity, migration. It's not true that Europeans are against immigrants. They are against those who are not with correct papers, let's say, so you don't know who is there. And Islam. With Islam, Europeans have some problems for reasons which I don't think we may now analyze. Some of you expressed this position on that, even some speaker, and it will be really too long to deal with this issue. I don't want to escape the question, of course. I simply say two short things. Islam leaders say that Islam is politics, not only religion. They say. There are books on this continuously. Even Khomeini to Oriana Fallaci said this, and others. We are not surprised. I mean, if you look at the biography of Muhammad, the Prophet, he was a warrior. He was doing politics. He was fighting in the name of God, in a way, as the Crusades did the same. He was fighting against the kings and others of the region of Arabia. And all the process was from the south to the north. All the history of Islam is a political history. The second question, which is also important, is that Islam is rooted in the principle of Ummah. Ummah is the community of the faithful, those who believe, the believers in God. The state doesn't exist in this philosophy. It's a broad human community faithful to God, but state is not there. In the Christianity, both things are absolutely opposite. Number one, you don't find one word in the gospel dealing with the state. And when the Jewish tried to provoke Jesus and say, hey, what is your position vis-a-vis the Romans who are, he said, I don't care. I am not here for dealing with that. But should we pay the tribute to Romans? Yes, why not? It's your government. Pay. Stop. In Islam, you have a long story of this. So Christianism, I'm not talking about what the Christians did during the history. This is another story. I'm stopping to Muhammad and Jesus. So the state, the political life or essence of the two religions is very different. This is what I wish, and I don't want to melt my conclusion with this question, which will be very long and even complicated. Security is part of this, but security was well analyzed by Giussi, Bartolozzi, and even by others. Let me rush a bit. Okay, let's try to go to future. Next Europe, as I call. What should be EU in order to close with this period of crisis which started 11 years ago and in a way is still not finished, a kind of standstill, blocked situation. I think that Europe should, EU should be back to the roots, as always happened. When a country is in crisis, there is always someone saying, hey, we have to go back to our roots. I'm doing the same. The EU was born social. It was born with the so-called social market economy, which was a combination of the Christian social policy, or social doctrine, as the theologians say, and the elaboration on economy also called Frankfurt School, SPD, the Socialist Democratic Party of Germany, at the time in the western part of Germany, which was divided, so Frankfurt School, as we say. Both said the same. It's strange because they were opponents in politics, but in social they were at the same position. And by chance, those days is 60 years from the Bad Godesberg event, where a Social Democratic Party of Germany abandoned Marxism and choose precisely this policy, saying we are different from Christians, but as far as social policy are concerned, we have to recognize that we share the same position. So this is what we have to realize. To respect the market, but to respect the poor, to respect the workers, to give good salary, appropriate salary, and do not stop the entrepreneurs, because entrepreneurs create wealth and jobs, etc. From the Reagan-Thatcher combination of so-called liberalism, which is not liberalism at all, so let's call neoliberalism, all this vision of Europe, which had made rich the European countries, including Italy, was lowering and lowering and lowering and lowering with dramatic effect. I wish just to give you some numbers. You know, there is a new acronym, WWW, is read by many in those Wild West. Not what? Why Wild West? Why? Because the capitalism, no more socialized, no more social, is absorbing more and more benefits for the owners and the highest management, and diminishing money for the workers and investments and innovation. This is a tragedy for the economists in general, not only for poor or for workers, because the money goes to those who have already money. They don't invest anymore for making the things going better. They have no more stimulation because the governments are no more acting as social equalizer. This is the point. The governments are governments of all the citizens, not of a privileged party, not even of the less. I mean, I would say the same if the Bolshevik government says the workers. No, the government is for all. What we are experiencing in the last decade is that our governments in capitalist countries, or in Western world, call it the way, are on a particular side, which is the side of big capital, big finance. This is bad for economy and for democracy. It's part of the reason why the rightist party, the populist party, the nationalism is rising, because people feels that they are abandoned by the governments, and they know that the wealth is going only to certain part of population, which is very, very reduced. It's 0, something, 1%. I mean, what is that? It's totally irrational for economy. It's not the sense of justice. Forget about justice. It's economically irrational because it doesn't produce wealth. It doesn't make societies better. It doesn't create innovation. And this has to stop. And the European Union has to be back to what it was before, when it was socially oriented. And imagine how much this is needed in time of climate changes, big migrations, a risk of populism, a risk of democracies in certain countries. You heard what is happening in Hungary, for instance, or in Poland. So this is absolutely urgent. And I guess that this is the only way also to respond to the complexity. No? Complexity has been another concept which came often in our debate. How do you respond to complexity? You have two ways. You simplify what is complex and you reduce to one and say, oh, complexity, no, complexity is only this, and you solve. The other way is that you start piece by piece on the complexity. At the end, you have to give a solution, one. The solution, in my opinion, in Europe is that one, to be back to social-oriented economic policies. And this is the need of European Union, in my opinion, in this very moment. So to save what is good as peace, dialogue among the member nations, the role of the parliament, etc. But to be back to social market economy, or market economy socially oriented. Thank you very much.